Hey there, and welcome to the Personal Finance Chat. This is part three in a four-part series where we take you from your first paycheck to your, hopefully not your last paycheck, but you know what I'm trying to get to here. So things that you should have been taught in high school, college, whatever, we're going to try and catch you up on in about 10 minutes every week or every other week, apparently. And I do want to apologize real quickly to the personal finance dad, Dustin. Yeah, I didn't mean to make you change your name, buddy. So you can stick with that if you want. So now he's the sports car dad or whatever. So I'm no threat to you, pal. You do what you need to do here. So, anyways, personal finance chat 3 in a four-part series. This is where we're going to talk about today. Whoops, excuse me. Let me just back up. First, we started off with saving and goal setting. Talked about the importance of saving and saving early. Part 2, we talked about savings vehicles. Starting with your employer plan for the most part, especially if they have some sort of match, that is about the only free money you will ever get. But then we talked a little bit about different IRA and 401k vehicles, traditional Roth, things of that nature, and the benefits therein. And we'll recap in just a second here. Today, we're going to talk about diversification and rebalancing next week, or maybe the week after. I don't know yet the way it's going. We'll talk about withdrawal options and a couple of the available options you have to take money out of these plans after you've saved all your money into them. So again, part 1, saving early and consistently. The earlier you do it, the better off you are. This person who saved for 10 years and stopped and wound up with a couple $100,000 more than the person who started 10 years later and saved an equal amount every year. So time value of money, that is a big deal. Then we talked about traditional and after-tax money. So it doesn't really matter if your tax rate stays the same, but if you feel that your taxes will decrease over time, if you're at a high income level now and you think that those dollars you take out of retirement will be taxed at perhaps a lower amount, then you want to defer those taxes until later. If you're getting started and your tax rate is nice and low, and you anticipate that it will grow and be at a higher rate when you take that money out, then the Roth option where you pay the taxes now may be a better option. And so that's what we did the last 2 weeks. This week we're going to talk about diversification. So diversify your bonds and stuff. So basically, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Typically, an asset that does well in 1 year maybe doesn't do the best the next year, and unless you're really good at predicting, and no one is, what is going to do well, there's ways to manage risk. But as far as guessing what's going to happen in the future, there are too many people that are consistently good at that. And so I want to very quickly take you to a couple of live examples here and show you why it is so important. And this is whoa, look at all the sparkle there. So from a website, The Novel Investor, but it has a really nice graphic I thought might be kind of fun to use. And so when you're diversifying and you're spreading your wealth out over a bunch of different baskets, when you get started, this isn't that darn important, okay? Most of the returns that you get, and one of the things I meant to touch on before I got this far here, I apologize. So once you're starting with your 401k, Roth, or whatever, you're putting in 5-10 grand a year, most of the returns that you see are going to come from what you put in, okay? So you put in $10,000 your first year and you make 10%, you've got $11,000. The next year you put in another $10,000. Now your account's upwards of $22,000, whatever it is. Most of the money, that growth of the account, is coming from what you put in. Now, a couple of years down the road, let's say your account's $50,000, $100,000, whatever, and you make 10%. Now you're starting to see some real money, right? Your money's going to start to work for you. That's when you want to start paying attention to diversifying and everything like that. So the money's starting to work for you, pay attention to it. Before, it was your contributions that were doing most of the heavy lifting. So just get those in there. But now you want to start paying attention. And so you can see the benefits of asset allocation or diversification. When you pick one thing that does well 1 year, what happens the next year? Not always by any stretch. I mean, real estate tends to do pretty well a lot of the time, but you don't want to put everything into one emerging market basket and then see it give it all back the next year. So 2008. High yield bonds did really well. Well, they've been at the lower end of the spectrum, since then. So they did their job protecting. So you want to get a slice of each of these things for the most part and put them into a diversified basket. And so you can see how this works out. I mean, sure, you real estate, but at times maybe you want some emerging markets or you want some small cap stocks. you don't have to pick just one. Put them into what's known as an asset allocation, and you're not going to be at the top in any given year, but you're probably not going to be at the bottom of returns in any given year. You're going to shoot right down the middle. This reduces your volatility and leads to consistency of returns for the most part. And so it's very important to diversify those assets. And what we've seen in the markets over the past, really since the start of this year, has been a great example. There's been, I think people have had a little bit of a potential warning shock. I don't want to say warning shot, but maybe a little bit of a wake-up call. Buying technology was the easiest thing ever. It's always worked, right? And so it does well when interest rates go down, but when they start to creep up, then you get into a little bit of a mess. And so you can see a couple live examples, not investment advice, just trying to make an example here, but we can look at the consumer discretionary sector represented by the XLY. And this is a fund that's a little bit more aggressive. You've got the Amazon, Netflix, things that people don't really have to have for the most part. They're discretionary, but they do tend to lead more aggressive. So when things are going well, they're going to outperform. When things are going south, they will tend to underperform. And it put in its peak last October, November, at the top of its range and broke trend. And now you're coming back into an area where some buying is starting to step in. But from $210 down to $160, that's a pretty decent loss if you've been holding the bag. Now, if you've been holding all along, you've still made money. But recently, that's been an underperformer. On the other side, if you were diversified and you had not everything in an XLI basket, but you had everything in a healthcare basket, or at least half and half or something like that, spread it out a little bit, you've held up much, much better. It's still holding on to trend, and it's been an outperformer for the most part. These are more defensive names. Look at like Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble. Think of those companies. They have the stuff that people need. So you're not getting away from it. So if you are able to diversify properly across those different, you're not going to be at the high end, you're not going to be at the low end, but you are going to shoot down the middle. So within your retirement plans, especially company, you probably have things called like target date funds or something like that. Those are pretty diversified, and they'll do a few things for you that you're probably not going to do on your own as far as rebalancing, and they can be a pretty nice option. But if you spend just a couple minutes every year and just make sure you're diversified and rebalanced, and you're really doing yourself a huge favor. All right. I think, diversify. So it's important to diversify your investments, but it's also important to diversify your tax strategy. We've talked about a few of these already, but while you're setting up that retirement plan, make sure that you're able to maximize what you take and minimize what you pay in. And a couple of ways to do that. And there's really three buckets that you want to make sure you address here. So you have the taxable money. This goes in with after-tax dollars, and it's taxed. The gains are taxed on an annual basis. No getting around it. Those would be things like your savings and checking account, any mutual funds or stocks that you're holding in a brokerage account. Stocks, if you just hold them, you're not paying tax on them. But if they kick out a dividend or something, then you will be subjected to that tax. But you can get at this money quickly, So it's important to have those reserves set up if something comes up. You don't want everything tied up in those long-term accounts where you can't get at it. So the taxable accounts do have the benefits. So once once you're getting started, you want to make sure you have access to money fairly quickly. This is a great option. Once you've filled up all those tax-deferred retirement baskets, you're coming back to the taxable account, and then you manage it a little bit differently. But it's a useful area for money. Then you've got your tax deferred accounts, and these are money that you put away before or after tax. It grows without tax coming out, and then at the end of the day, tax may or may not be taken out. In this example, we're talking about traditional IRA and 401ks, and so you're taxed at the end. You're not paying tax up front, and so the accounts have a tendency to grow a little bit quicker because you're not taking out taxes every year. But then you pay the taxes at the end of the day. Pension plans and annuities mostly work like this as well. And lastly, we have tax-free accounts, okay, or vehicles, not accounts, tax-free vehicles. And those are the Roth versions of the IRA and 401k. You pay your tax up front. It grows tax deferred, but at the end of the day, pending Congress not changing any laws, which is never a guarantee. Also a reason you want to diversify your tax strategy. There's no telling what these people will do in a decade or two. But they grow tax deferred, and then at the end of the day, you're not paying taxes anymore because you paid it up front. And so again, this makes sense if you feel like your tax bracket will be higher later on than it is now. Pay the taxes now. Municipal bonds also fall into this. Certain municipal bonds, I should say. If you buy a municipal bond, it spits off income and interest, and you're not paying tax on that for the most part. There there's some rules around that, but we're just trying to do the quick and dirty here. So as important as it is to diversify your investments, it is equally important to diversify your tax strategy. If you've got everything in this tax deferred basket, the basket where you're going to pay taxes at the end of the day, then if you've got a couple $1,000,000 in there, you could be in a very high potential tax bracket if you're taking out 200 grand a year, just like when you were working. But if you've got money in the tax deferred basket, you've got some money in the tax free basket, then what you're doing is reducing your overall tax liability. You're paying it a little bit as you go. You're always going to pay it once. But say you've got $1 million in each instead of $2 million in one, and then you've cut your taxes at that point in half, roughly. So, and then the taxable bracket, obviously, you're just paying as you go for the most part, and there's ways to manage that. So, diversify your investments, diversify your tax strategy, and one of the easiest things to do that no one ever does is rebalancing. Now, if you're in a 401k and you've got one of those target date funds, they will rebalance for you on an annual basis. But this is really simple, and it's really, really important. Again, if you're in your 401k account, you can click rebalance. Just do it once a year. Click the rebalance button. It'll bring you back in line with your diversification strategy. But basically what we're trying to do here is, let's say we've got two stocks, all right? We've got stock A. Whoops, let me go this way here so you can see it. Stock A and stock B. Let's say stock A goes up in 1 year. Whoops. Yeah. There we go. I got it right. And stock B goes down. Then what we're wanting to do is rebalance them. Okay. So what are we doing here? We're selling high, buying low, bringing them back into balance. Do that consistently over time. That will add some, well, potentially, but most likely add some. I have to get away from will and guarantee. That will most likely add juice to your overall returns just by paying attention to what you have, buying high, selling low. That'll do it automatically. And just paying attention to your investments. So, all right, quick and dirty. There it is. That's what I got for you. We'll wrap it up in a week or two, probably next week, with part 4, how to take all this good money out. What are your options there? And I appreciate your time. Have a great rest of the day. Bye now.